How much is a mother worth? That question shattered my world the moment I heard it, straight from my own daughter's voice message, a message meant for her husband. She called me a burden, laughed about putting me in a nursing home for just $800 a month, and whispered that if I died there, it wouldn't be so bad because the insurance was already in their name. That single recording didn't just break my heart. It opened a war I never asked for, but one I was determined to win. Eleanor. That's my name. 66 years old, hair silvered not by the weather, but by the storms I've walked through. That morning, I was alone in my kitchen, the sun barely warming the porcelain teacup I cradled. The house creaked the way old houses do, voices in the floorboards, memories in the drywall. This house wasn't just painted wood and bricks. I'd mortgaged it twice. Once to pay for my daughter Ashley's college tuition, once more to keep her husband David from drowning when a business deal dragged him under. I believed in family even when it forgot how to believe in me. My phone chimed, a voice message, Ashley's name on the screen. I smiled without thinking. Mothers do that, even when they shouldn't. I pressed play. Ashley, David said in the background. Shh, David, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. Ashley's voice sliced through him. A casual blade, well practiced. She meddles. She costs us money. Tiffany says the paperwork is easy. One signature. David, it's practically done. We'll say she's confused, get her placed. $800 a month at St. Bridget's. Cheap. Then we redo the kitchen. Finally. Tiffany. The cousin at the clerk's office who wears secrets like perfume. A second notification hit. An email slid in. Deed. From Ashley to Tiffany. I shouldn't have opened it. I did. The text was brief. Draft the transfer for Mom's house. We'll handle her signature. She still thinks she's clever, but she's just old. One signature. Let's finish this. A laughing emoji, then a winking face. Do you know how humiliation sounds in your own body? It's the brittle snap of something you thought would never break. Another message rolled on. And the life insurance is already in our name, Ashley added, her tone bright as noon. If something happens while she's at the home, well, David, God forgive me, it wouldn't be the worst thing. If you've ever stood in a room and felt the oxygen leave, you know what happened next. The floor turned to water. The edges of my vision fuzzed. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode, and stared at the tea cooling into a pale, unremarkable puddle. My mother used to say, respect isn't handed down with blood, it's earned with love and kept with boundaries. I'd lived the first half of that sentence. I'd forgotten the second. I didn't sleep that night. I wandered the hallway like a ghost who couldn't figure out what tethered her to the living. Here, the family photos lined the wall. Ashley at 8 in a strawberry dress. Ashley at 22 in a cap and gown. Ashley at 26. Cheeks pink from the bridal blush while David whispered promises across the cake. That dress was bought with a loan on this roof. Those promises, like moths, had long since eaten holes in the fabric of our lives. By 3 a.m., I'd reached the room I never let anyone enter, a small cedar closet with a cloth bag on the top shelf. Inside, a red pantsuit that I'd worn to Ashley's graduation, crisp as a held breath, and a ring, gold dulled by memory more than time. My wedding ring from a man who promised he'd stay and didn't. I slipped it into my pocket, not for nostalgia, but for spine. I needed a talisman to remind me, never again, not to weak men, not to ungrateful children, not to anyone who confuses kindness with consent. At dawn, the house was blue with cold light. The mirror gave me back a face I recognized and a woman I had not seen in years. The suit fit like a decision. I lined my lips, pinned my hair, and looked myself in the eyes. "You're not a victim," I said. "You're the owner of this story." I gathered what mattered: binders of bank statements, a folder marked insurance, and the deed, the original one, the one with my name unshaken. When I stepped into the hallway, I paused. Ashley's door was ajar. She and David had moved temporarily into my house 2 weeks before. On the dresser, a sketch of a new kitchen lay open: bright marble counters, a double oven, a price circled in black ink: $85,000. It looked like a wedding invitation to a marriage I'd never attend. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed its quiet complaint. I left a note on the table: "Out early, personal matters, back later. Mom." No anger, no explanation. The currency of explanations had been devalued in this house. Outside, the air had the sharpness of a clean blade. My first stop was the bank. Nora, the branch manager who'd watched me bring rolls of coins in a recycled coffee can to open my first account, met me with the gentle suspicion bankers learn around the same time they learn compound interest. "Morning, Eleanor. What can we do for you?" "I need to secure my accounts, change all my beneficiaries, and flag any third-party access," I said. "And Nora, if someone presented an authorization letter from me in the past 6 months, I want to see it." Nora's fingers clicked against the keyboard, a tiny metronome. "There is a letter on file, actually. From Ashley. She presented it on your behalf to review statements. It's signed by you." She turned the screen. The signature looked like mine from a distance and nothing like mine up close. The slant was wrong. The flourish at the end didn't know my wrist. "You know me," I said quietly. "You've watched my hand sign deposit slips for 15 years. That is not my hand." Nora's mouth tightened. "We'll revoke authorization immediately. I'll file an internal fraud report. Let's move your funds to a new account today." She lowered her voice. "And Eleanor, do you want to change your life insurance beneficiary?" "I already did in my head," I told her. "Let's make it real." We sat a long time, long enough for the sunlight to slide from one half of her desk to the other, while we rekeyed, re-signed, renamed. When it was done, my savings lived under a new number. The insurance pointed toward a foundation that shelters elders no one visits, and an alert sat on my profile like a sentinel. Second stop, the county clerk's building. If honesty has a smell, that office didn't carry it. Tiffany's nameplate gleamed on a desk stacked with the quiet arrogance of official paper. I tucked a small recorder into my purse lining, then smiled like a woman who still believed her cousin's daughter made honest mistakes. "Morning, Tiffany. I came to check my property file. Ashley said you were helping her organize some updates." She went pale in a way makeup can't fix. "Aunt Eleanor, I didn't know you were—" Ashley told me. "That I'm confused? That I forget? That I sign things without reading?" I asked gently. "Help me understand what you're helping her do." She swallowed, glanced toward the copy machine, then back at me. "It's just routine. If you ever wanted to transfer—" "I never wanted to transfer," I said, the warmth gone from my voice. "But I do want you to explain, on the record, how an adult child transfers a house without the mother noticing, slowly, in small words." There is a moment in every confrontation where the lie gets tired. Tiffany's eyes glossed with tears. She talked about provisional affidavits and temporary guardianship and medical letters, and how one forged signature can open a door large enough to drag a life through. By the time I left, I had more than a confession. I had a letter she wrote by hand: "I am sorry, Aunt Eleanor," and certified copies of every sham document they'd prepared. I walked out of that building feeling the floor under me again. My third stop was a law office with glass walls and a receptionist who said good morning like she was rationing it. Mr. Miller came out to greet me, tall and careful, the way men get when they've lived long enough to understand what a woman standing up straight means. "Eleanor," he said, and then did a double take. "Eleanor Whitcomb? We took chemistry in high school. You used to beat me on every lab report." He laughed, and I did too. Just a small, startled sound, but it loosened something in me that had been wound too tightly. We sat in his office, and I laid the evidence between us like cards no one could pretend not to see. The email, the voice message, the forged authorization, the clerk copies with Tiffany's shaky signature at the bottom. "This is a well-worn scheme," Mr. Miller said at last. "Cruel because it hides under the mask of care. We'll move on 2 tracks, civil for restitution and protection, criminal for fraud and conspiracy. I can have officers and a notary at your home tomorrow morning. We'll present, document, and, if you choose, arrest." "If I choose," I repeated. "Eleanor," he said, "I know what it costs to put cuffs on a child you once bent down to tie shoes for." "I bent down for 30 years, I said. It's time she learned how to kneel at the truth. When I stepped back into my house that evening, the light had gone gold and soft. Ashley and David were in the living room, a magazine open to granite countertops. The smell of my own home felt borrowed. "How were your errands?" Ashley asked, her smile as neat as a folded napkin. "Necessary," I said. "We'll have visitors tomorrow at 10. Please be dressed, please be honest." "Visitors?" David drawled. "Like who?" "You'll see," I told him. I walked to my room, closed the door gently, and leaned my back against it. My heart should have been racing. It wasn't. It beat steady. A drum line under a parade I finally led. If you were me, standing with your back to a thin door and a lifetime of choices pressing on it, if you had heard your own child price your life like a used car listing, what would you do next? Would you confront them tonight, burning fast and bright? Or would you let morning come like a verdict? Tell me, because I stood there and listened to the house breathe and chose the slow fire. Down the hall, their voices rose and fell, whispers that had once excluded me and now no longer mattered. I took the ring from my pocket, set it on the bedside table, and turned off the lamp. In the dark, my mother's sentence found its end. Respect isn't handed down with blood. It's earned with love and kept with boundaries. By 10 a.m. tomorrow, they would meet both. Before we dive into today's drama, be sure to subscribe to the Heartbreak channel and turn on your notifications. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Where are you watching? Leave a comment below. Maybe the next story resonates with your own personal experience. The night was long. I lay in bed listening to the whispering of my daughter and son-in-law down the hall. Their words, muffled by plaster, still managed to bruise. At one point, Ashley laughed, a high, carefree sound, and it cut deeper than any curse. How do you laugh when you've just plotted your own mother's exile? At dawn, I dressed again in the red suit. This time it felt less like armor and more like skin. If I was to face the storm, I needed to remind myself of the roots I had watered with my own blood. I grew up in a house that shook with every passing train. My mother used to tell me, "We have little, but we hold it with both hands." When Ashley was born, I swore she'd never know the hunger I did. I worked nights cleaning offices, mornings cooking for neighbors, afternoons ironing clothes. I pawned the only pearls my mother left me to buy Ashley her first semester's books. Later, I mortgaged the house to pay her tuition. When she married David, I signed another loan to cover the wedding, smiling through the pain in my chest. She kissed me that night and whispered, "Someday I'll pay you back." But someday never came. It began softly, almost politely. Missed Sunday dinners. Calls sent to voicemail. Then David lost his job, and the requests for money arrived disguised as emergencies. I gave until giving meant eating rice with butter for weeks. Soon, neighbors were repeating Ashley's stories about me, how I was forgetful, how I'd left the stove on, how I'd lost my way to church. Lies rehearsed so well they stuck to my skin. One afternoon I came home to find my bedroom door closed. Inside, Ashley told David, "We need this room as an office. Mom can use the guest room." My photographs were in a box, my quilt folded away. My home was shrinking around me like wool in hot water. Then strangers began showing up, social workers, doctors, even a neurologist. They asked questions with tilted heads. "Do you know the date, Eleanor? Who's the president?" I answered sharply, and they scribbled notes as if anger proved confusion. Later I overheard Dr. Adams mutter, "Signs of mild cognitive decline. Nothing serious, but keep observing." The ink in his pen could have signed away my freedom. Tiffany appeared with folders she tried to hide. I saw my name through the thin paper. "Routine updates," she muttered, but I knew. Guardianship, power of attorney, words that wear the mask of care but walk like thieves. And then came the voice message, then the email. Together, they formed a rope to strangle me. Ashley laughed in that recording. "Putting her in St. Bridget's is basically a funeral while she's alive." David chuckled. "We'll finally have peace. And when the insurance kicks in..." That night I dropped to the kitchen floor, my body folding as if I were a paper doll. For a moment, I thought about leaving. To a motel, a friend's couch, anywhere but here. But as I pressed my cheek to the cold tile, something inside me hardened. If they saw me as weak, then weakness would be my disguise. The next day, I smiled at breakfast, asked David about his job search, let Ashley ramble about new countertops. I played the part of the confused, docile mother. Inside, I was recording, saving, planning. I spoke quietly with Mrs. Helen next door. "If anything happens tomorrow morning, would you come over, just to witness?" She agreed, puzzled but kind. That evening, I organized files, stacked them neatly, labeled each one: bank, insurance, deed, fraud. Every sheet of paper became a soldier lined up for war. If you were in my shoes, your only child plotting to lock you away from money, what would you do? Would you confront her in anger? Would you run? Or would you, like me, decide that sometimes the sharpest blade is patience? By the time the clock struck 9, the house was quiet. Ashley and David slept in the master bedroom, my bedroom, dreaming of renovations bought with betrayal. I sat in the guest room, a stranger in my own home, the documents glowing under lamplight. Tomorrow at 10, the house would become a courtroom, and I, Eleanor Whitcomb, would no longer be the accused. I would be the witness, the plaintiff, the verdict. Morning came with a strange calm, the kind that makes the air feel heavier, as though the world itself knows a storm is about to break. I brewed coffee, careful not to let the spoon clink against the cup, careful not to wake Ashley and David, who were still asleep in my bedroom, the room they had stolen from me. My hand shook once when I caught my reflection in the mirror. The red suit no longer felt like armor. It felt like the truest version of me. The knock came at 9:30. When I opened the door, Mr. Miller stood there, briefcase in hand, with 2 officers and a notary behind him. Mrs. Helen, my neighbor, slipped in quietly a moment later, her presence a reminder that not everyone had abandoned me. Are you ready? Mr. Miller asked. I've been ready since last night, I replied. At 10, Ashley and David shuffled into the living room. Ashley wore her robe. David still smelled of sleep. They froze when they saw the uniforms. What's going on? Ashley snapped. Sit, I said. My voice didn't tremble. We have things to discuss, David sneered, trying to take control. Mom, you didn't need to call the police. This isn't about need. Mr. Miller cut him off, his voice sharp. It's about evidence. He spread the documents across the coffee table. The forged authorization at the bank, the guardianship papers Tiffany had prepared, the draft deed transfer. Ashley's face drained of color. This is a misunderstanding, she whispered. I pressed play on my phone. Her voice filled the room. Putting her in St. Bridget's is basically a funeral while she's alive. The laughter that followed, her laughter, echoed off the walls. Ashley lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but the officer blocked her. She fell back, trembling. It was a joke, she gasped. We didn't mean... Everyone jokes about collecting life insurance when their mother dies? I asked softly. The silence that followed was unbearable. Mr. Miller placed another sheet of paper on the table. Tiffany's handwriting sprawled across it. A confession. Ashley's lips parted, her eyes wild. She wouldn't... She did, Mr. Miller said. She admitted it all. David stood abruptly, towering over me. You think this means anything? You'll regret this, Eleanor. You'll die alone. One of the officer's pens clicked. That's a threat, he said flatly. Sit down, David, I ordered. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. He obeyed. You've already stolen my peace. You won't steal this moment. Mrs. Helen, who had been quiet, stepped forward. I heard that message too, she said. Eleanor played it for me last night. I came to make sure the truth had witnesses. The last color drained from Ashley's cheeks. She clutched her knees, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please. I was desperate. We were broke. I didn't mean... You didn't mean? My words trembled, but not with fear. You laughed about my funeral. You calculated how long you could live off my death. Tell me, Ashley, how much is your mother worth to you? 10 years of comfort? A remodeled kitchen? Her sobs filled the room, but I felt nothing. Grief had burned away, leaving only clarity. I stood, the red suit catching the sunlight pouring through the window. This house is mine. This life is mine. You treated me like a burden, an account to drain, a nuisance to erase. But today you'll learn, I may be old, but I am not helpless, and betrayal will not be my legacy. The officers stepped forward. The sharp sound of handcuffs broke the air. Ashley wailed as cold steel closed around her wrists. Mom, don't do this to me. I didn't do this, I told her, my voice low. You did. David cursed. But the cuffs found his wrists too. They were led toward the door, Ashley crying, David spitting fury. Mrs. Helen whispered beside me, Justice has a sound. Today it sounds like that. When the door shut, silence filled the house again. But this time it was clean, almost holy. Mr. Miller began gathering the papers, his movements calm, deliberate. This isn't over, he said gently. They'll try to smear you to twist the story. But you've already won the most important battle. You've proven you are not a victim. I sank onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. But for the first time in years, I breathed without weight on my chest. Outside, I heard whispers, neighbors gathering, murmuring, watching. Let them talk. Let them tell the story of what betrayal looks like when it is dragged into daylight. If you had been in that living room, watching your own child in handcuffs for plotting your ruin, what would you feel? Relief? Rage? Would you crumble? Or would you, like me, discover that sometimes the deepest betrayal can forge a strength you never knew you had? I knew one thing. Tonight, for the first time in years, I would sleep in my own bed, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as the rightful owner of my life. The hours after Ashley and David were taken from the house felt unreal, like the air itself was lighter, yet charged with something electric. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, running my hand over the mantel, pausing in the bedroom that had once been mine. It felt reclaimed, though their shadows still lingered like smoke after a fire. For the first time in weeks, I closed the door and whispered to myself, "Mine." But I knew this was not the end. Betrayal doesn't retreat quietly. It claws back, desperate, ugly. Mr. Miller reminded me of that as we sat together that evening. "They'll fight you," he said. "Expect them to smear your name, to flood you with harassment. Prepare for it, but know this: we have truth, and truth is stubborn." He was right. The next days were filled with anonymous calls, threatening letters slid under my door, whispers around town. On social media, false stories bloomed like weeds. I was senile, I was violent, I had disowned Ashley for no reason at all. But I had prepared. Each letter went into a folder marked harassment. Each call was logged. Every insult became another nail in the coffin of their credibility. What they did not know was that the more they fought, the more evidence they left behind. And I was collecting it all. One morning, I returned to the bank. Nora greeted me warmly, her eyes full of quiet pride. "Everything in your accounts is secure now," she assured me. And I reviewed the authorization logs. "Ashley tried to access your old account again yesterday. She failed. But now we have proof she's still attempting fraud." "That proof," I said, "is worth more than money." From there, I went to Tiffany's office one final time. She was pale, frightened, the weight of her confession pressing on her shoulders. I handed her a letter I had drafted the night before. "Sign this," I told her, "a formal admission of what you did. And then write one more, an apology, to me, to the county, to yourself." Her hand trembled as she signed. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the ink settle on paper was enough. By the end of that week, Mr. Miller had built a case strong enough to withstand any storm. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, harassment, the list stretched long, and each item was backed with evidence. And yet, I knew that legal justice, though necessary, wasn't enough. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my story. So I made choices that would wound where it hurt most: reputation and money. First, I rewrote my will. The house, the savings, the insurance, every cent would go to the Golden Hope Foundation, a group dedicated to supporting elderly people abandoned by their families. $490,000, I told Mrs. Evelyn, the director. "Let it shelter those who need it most." She cried, and for the first time in days so did I. But these tears were cleansing. Second, I reported Ashley and David's tax evasion. Mr. Miller guided me through the paperwork. Within weeks, the IRS had launched an investigation. They owed $35,000 in back taxes. Their accounts were frozen, their credit ruined. Third, I exposed the corruption Tiffany had revealed. With Mr. Miller's help, we passed documents to state investigators. Within a month, 6 employees at the clerk's office were dismissed, and 12 fraudulent property transfers were overturned. My case had become the spark for a fire larger than myself. Meanwhile, the public scandal grew. Newspapers ran the story. Children tried to steal mother's home. Elder fights back. On local TV, my name was spoken with a mixture of pity and admiration. Ashley and David's faces were splashed across the screen, labeled as fraudsters. Their friends avoided them. David lost the last chance at employment he'd been clinging to. Ashley's social circle dissolved into whispers. One afternoon, as I walked home from the market, Mrs. Helen hurried to meet me. "You've become a symbol," she said, almost breathless. "People are talking about boundaries, about justice. They say you gave them courage." Her words warmed me, but I didn't let pride settle too deep. Symbols are heavy things to carry. I was just a woman who had been betrayed and refused to disappear. The final blow came not in a courtroom, but in a community hall. I had been invited to speak at a gathering about elder rights, to tell my story. I stood at the podium, the lights hot on my face, and shared everything. The sacrifices I had made, the betrayal I endured, the strength I discovered. And then, from the back of the hall, Ashley appeared. Her eyes were swollen, her body slouched with shame. She walked forward slowly, then knelt before me. "Mom," she whispered, the word breaking in her throat. "I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked. I looked down at her, my daughter, my betrayer, the child I had once held to my chest. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "I forgive you," I said, my voice carrying through the room. But forgiveness does not mean trust. Forgiveness does not erase. "I will not let you hurt me again." She wept openly, and I turned back to the crowd. "This," I told them, "is what betrayal looks like, and this," I lifted my head high, "is what survival looks like. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned with love and kindness, and it is kept with boundaries." The applause that followed was thunderous, but more than applause, it was affirmation. That night, as I returned to my quiet house, I felt the walls breathe differently. No longer haunted, no longer heavy. This was no longer just a house. It was mine again, and it held not the echoes of betrayal, but the proof of resilience. If you were in my place, standing on that stage, with your betrayer kneeling before you, what would you have done? Would you embrace them? Would you turn away? Or would you, like me, find the balance between forgiveness and self-preservation? The night after that community hall meeting, I returned home with my voice still trembling in my chest, not from fear, but from release. For the first time in years, I felt the kind of peace that comes when you finally put down a burden you should never have carried. I walked through the house slowly, as if reacquainting myself with an old friend. Each room had been tainted by betrayal, but now it hummed with something new: ownership, justice, survival. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I had once overheard Ashley's cruel laughter through a phone message, and realized how full circle my journey had become. The scars were there. They would always be. But scars tell you that healing happened. The days that followed brought headlines, whispers, and invitations. The local paper published my story under the headline, "Elder Betrayed, Elder Triumphant." Neighbors who had once pitied me now nodded with respect. Strangers stopped me at the market to squeeze my hand and whisper, "You gave me courage." One woman, her hair as silver as mine, leaned close and said, "My son tried to take my house too. I thought I was alone. Thank you for showing me I wasn't." I realized then that my story was no longer just my own. It belonged to every mother who had ever been treated as disposable, every elder who had ever been written off as a burden, every woman who had sacrificed and been paid back with betrayal. The legal battles continued in the background. Ashley and David faced restitution, tax liens, and a public record that would follow them for decades. Their marriage crumbled under the weight of blame. They lashed out at each other in court, each trying to paint the other as the mastermind. Watching from the gallery, I felt no satisfaction, only inevitability. When you build a house of lies, it always collapses. But I did not linger there. My life had already moved on. I sold the house I had once mortgaged to keep them afloat. The very walls that had witnessed my humiliation and my vindication were too heavy with memory. I found a smaller apartment in a lively community for active seniors. The first night I slept there, the quiet was gentle rather than suffocating. I joined a painting class, letting colors speak where words could not. I signed up for a dance group, awkward at first, then laughing with women who spun joy into every step. At the Golden Hope Foundation, I volunteered, sitting with elders who whispered stories of betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak. I told them my own story, and each time I did, the wound healed a little more. It was there I decided to start something new, a scholarship fund named after my mother, for young women who had been cast aside but refused to surrender. My mother had stitched my childhood together with thread and hope. It was time to pass that strength forward. Ashley reached out once more. This time, it was not through a lawyer or a demand, but through a handwritten note slipped into my mailbox. Mom, I know I don't deserve to ask, but I am trying to rebuild my life. I am sorry for everything, not just for what I did to you, but for who I let myself become. If forgiveness is possible, I hope someday you will find it in your heart. I read it twice, then placed it in the same cedar box where I had kept my wedding ring. It belonged to the past, important to remember, dangerous to dwell on. Forgiveness, I had already offered. Trust, I never would again. One Sunday afternoon, I stood in my small balcony garden, watering pots of lavender and basil, and thought of the words my mother had given me long ago. Respect isn't handed down with blood, it's earned with love and kept with boundaries. I finally understood the second half of that lesson. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are fences that mark where love can grow safely. As I share this story with you, I want to ask, if you were me, would you have forgiven Ashley, or would you have turned your back completely? Have you ever faced betrayal from the very people you sacrificed for? If so, what gave you strength to keep going? Because here, in this community, no one is alone. Each story is another reminder that justice is not just a word in a courtroom. Justice is the courage to stand tall, to reclaim your voice, to draw a line and say, no more. My journey was painful, but it led me here, to freedom, to dignity, to a life where I am no longer defined by what was taken from me, but by what I chose to build afterward. And that, perhaps, is the true inheritance we can leave behind. Not money, not houses, but the unshakable lesson that betrayal cannot silence love, and love cannot exist without respect. So if you're listening now, let this be your reminder. It's never too late to write a new chapter. Never too late to set boundaries. Never too late to demand the respect you deserve. And if this story touched you, I invite you, share your own. Have you lived through something similar? Have you seen injustice in your family, in your circle? Tell us in the comments, because by speaking, we heal, and by healing, we remind each other, no one walks this path alone. Don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories. Here, you'll always find tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and the twists that bring justice back where it belongs.